Mary Beatty was well-spoken, well-educated, ran many of her husband's businesses, and was growing a new Presbyterian congregation at the church by the village burial grounds. My Aunt Sarah attended the first ever service there on May 30th, 1858, and she was hooked. So she decided to join the Presbyterian congregation. However, this also meant she'd be moving the now long-dead Aunt Hazel to the village burial grounds. Oh yeah, you got it. Me and my cousins had to move Aunt Hazel. She was buried at the graveyard up by 5th Avenue, and Sarah just picked out a lovely plot of land at the village burial grounds. That was, 3 blocks down, 2 blocks over. Quite a ways to carry a wooden casket that had been rotting in the ground for 3 years. But when Mama says do it, you do it. So the 4 of us gathered some rope, a couple shovels, and headed to the graveyard just before sunset. You might think, why did we wait until so late in the day? Well, it wasn't bad enough we had to dig up and move Hazel, but I didn't need the whole town watching me and the boys carry a wooden casket down Main Street. Digging up Hazel was the easy part, but then we had to slip the ropes around and under the dark green moss-covered casket and hoist it up from its dark, moist grave. 1, 2, 3. We heaved and hoed, grunted and moaned, and finally, as if the tree roots had finally broken away, Hazel's coffin landed beside me. We kept the ropes under the casket and threw them over our shoulders, with one boy on each corner. I decided perhaps we should take to the alleyways to avoid explaining why we were carrying a half-rotten Miss Hazel across town. Right before we were about to get out of the alleyway, a rat scampered from the shadows and slammed in my cousin Mac's leg. He screamed bloody murder, and then I screamed, and then we all screamed like little schoolgirls that had just gotten new pink dresses. But more importantly, we all dropped our ropes. And Hazel's coffin slammed to the ground, rolling on its side, spewing dirt and fragments of wood in all directions. The lid flew off and Hazel slid from her home of 3 years onto the cold dirt of the alleyway. Not only was the coffin covered in green moss, but so was Hazel. Her hair was white and straggly, and a layer of forest green had consumed her linen dress. Her skin was gray and dry, with the exception of the bright red lipstick that still covered her sunken lips. What did we do? We ran. What else would 4 teenage boys do? We ran all the way home and didn't stop until we were safely inside the barn, with the doors bolted. When we all made it back to our senses, we knew we had to go back. We would all be dead men if anyone found out. When we made it back to the alleyways, we couldn't believe our eyes. Hazel's coffin was no longer askew, but sitting upright in the middle of the pathway. The lid was tightly adhered to the top of the coffin, and all 4 ropes were neatly aligned on each corner. I looked at the boys out of the corner of my eyes, but no one said a word. We each grabbed a rope and headed across Main Street. I didn't look at the other boys, but I knew we were all thinking the same thing. Either Hazel had lost a lot of weight, or Hazel wasn't in the box. Without further incident, we put the coffin at the village burial grounds and never spoke of that night again. Half a dozen years went by, and 2 of my cousins perished in the war. Cousin Mac, who had always been sickly, had taken a turn for the worst and lay on his bed of the verge of death, so I headed over to say my goodbyes. I grabbed his lifeless hand. To my surprise, his grip was strong and firm. He pulled me close to his face. That night, Hazel. I shook my head. We had never talked about it. Never. Do you see her? The woman in the green? I took a deep breath in and bit the edges of my lips. Yes. She always follows me down the alleyways. I think she's lost and looking for a new home. He slowly nodded his head. Me too. He closed his eyes and drew his last breath. Now, most folks don't heed the warnings about the green woman who haunts the alleyways of Conway. but I sure do. It's been nice chatting with you folks, but I better be heading on home. I'll be taking the main road. If any of you decide to take the shortcut down the alleyway, be sure to say hello to my Aunt Hazel. She'll be the one in the green.